And just like that, we're back. You are still watching the SPL Week 2, Day 2. This time, though, we've got Pittsburgh Knights and Obey to round out this fine Saturday. My name is Dolson Mifflin, still with me to talk SPL today. And Miff, what a set we just had. The string of 2-0s continues, and it's Sanguine who are on top after set 1.
They are. They certainly are. However, Obey, Finch brought it up, the biggest beneficiary maybe outside of Sanguine is Obey from that last set, but that only stands true if Obey can find their first win here today against PK.
I agree, and that's who we've got. And then tomorrow we'll have a United Renegades to start off the day. I think this is a big matchup, though, for both of these teams, and to kind of just continue on that Obey conversation. And again, looking at these standings, kind of the opposite of what we saw in our previous set, where Sanguine SSG fighting to remain undefeated, granted only through 2 weeks. Pittsburgh Knights and Obey both looking for their first win. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously every team, every game, so important. But why would you argue, or do you think it's maybe more important for Obey to now grab their first win here in this matchup?
I think it is fair to say that Obey might have a little bit more pressure put on them today simply because of Sanguine's performance. Yes, I mean, PK is the favorite, community favorite, as well as I think even on the caster team, we probably favor PK here simply because if you look at the rosters and how they play, Obey has a very similar playstyle to PK. They all have very aggressive playstyles. I mean, Belair and Ducky are some of the most aggressive soul laners in the league. Zapman and Wlfy, both very mechanical players out of that Hunter role. So I think that there is a bit of a question mark on which one of these guys is going to come out ahead. However, I think Obey has that added pressure of having to prove themselves in the league now.
Yep, I agree. And I think you look at kind of this core of Obey, Ducky, Weekend, Wowy, 3 guys that were together throughout last year. Then you add in Inbound, you add in Wlfy. What have you made of those 2 new additions here for the Obey roster?
I mean, I hate to say it. I'm a huge fan of Inbound as a person. I love Bobby, okay? I'm going to say it right now. But the performance we saw last week from everyone from Obey, every single one of them, I wasn't personally impressed. Individually as players, I can't with 100% approval rate say that they are SPL caliber, SPL ready, but that could be due to this growing pain of this new squad. Maybe they aren't really comfortable playing off of each other. Maybe it's this new leadership. I don't know what exactly it is, but I think if they want to prove themselves, today is the day to do it.
Do you think one thing I took away from week 1 is that this roster has a lot of talent that can be built on and should be built on as this split goes on, but one of those remaining members is Ducky, and we were able to sit down with him and hear his thoughts prior to this big matchup.
I'm here with Ducky, solo laner for Obey. And Ducky, the first thing I got to ask you about, man, is last week. I know that you all didn't get the result that you wanted for, but talk to me a bit about what happened and how the squad's planning on bouncing back this week.
Well, we lost. That wasn't great. We don't want to do that. So I don't know. I feel like we played the early game pretty well, and then after that, it just kind of went downhill. Usually ran Gold Fury fights, I think, is where we kind of scuffed our lead. So I think, like, going into this week, we practiced the objectives per se, and like going in, not inting after getting objectives or when going for them. Like, have a clear plan going into it. So hopefully, it's cleaned up for this week's games. I'd like to think.
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you all end up playing. Talk to me a little bit, because you're going to be laning up against Scary in the solo lane, right? What's it like laning against him in particular from your experience with him in the past? And can I expect you to find some solo kills or something like that over there for me?
Oh, I doubt it. I think I'd be getting smacked by Scary. He plays, like, really aggressive characters. Like, he was, like, I think one of the first to pick Camazotz a lot. I could be, like, just talking out. Oh, I can't say that. Just... making stuff up, but I'm pretty sure he was like a very prominent Camazotz player, and he plays a lot of aggressive picks like Achilles as well. So I'm going to be playing into that, so hopefully I don't die. That would suck. Chat would meme me. Don't want that happening. Kurt has enough of that already. So hopefully I just play the lane safe, no deaths here and there, and we'll just transition that into late game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Weekend's kind of the lightning rod, right? So all of that extra attention kind of goes to him. Well, what's it like with Inbound? Because I feel like you guys are the ones juggling all the frontline responsibilities, and he's so aggressive. Like, he's always in there in the backline mixing things up. How do you all kind of split up those responsibilities, and what's it like working with him?
Usually in the comms, you'll hear Bobby like, "Yo, this is a free pick. This is a free pick, guys. He's by himself, and he's got 5 teammates behind him, just waiting." So we have to just. It's Bobby saying, "Yo, go in, go in, go in," and everyone else saying, "No, Bobby, back up," because he doesn't stop going in. If we didn't call him back, I don't think he'd have under 10 deaths every game. So bless his heart, he's helping us play more aggressive, which I think we need. But yeah, it's a lot of just was it tug of war? There we go. It's a good term for it.
I think it's easier to kind of, reel someone in than help them get more aggressive. So you all will be able to lock that one in. Well, I appreciate you talking here with us, Ducky, for a little while. Good luck in your set here. It's a big one up against the Knights, and we'll be looking forward to watching y'all play.
All right, thank you very much.
I don't know how you don't just love Ducky. What a personality, what a guy, and I love the point that he makes about Inbound there. Is maybe overly aggressive at some points, but I agree. Then with Finch, is once you dial that in, we're in a nice middle ground. Mifflin, I know you're probably one of the biggest Ducky fans there is out there, and maybe unfortunate you couldn't do that interview, but did you like what you heard out of Ducky prior to this big game?
I liked what I heard out of Ducky. I don't think there's a single fan in the audience that didn't love everything that came out of Ducky's mouth there. He's such a likable dude. And it is because he's Ducky. He's got that Ducky X factor. And truth told, Ducky on this squad from Obey, it's so good to see that he's humble, but he is the sole member of Obey that has been performing leagues above the rest of his team. Sure. If his squad is failing around fights around the gold field, you can trust that Ducky's going to at least have his lane on lock, or he's going to be performing above what you would think from his station. So I think that seeing him being humble and being able to work with his team is fantastic for the future of Obey, because it is going to be a tumultuous start. It has been a tumultuous start, and they need to continue trucking on and improving as a squad. So I think that mentality is going to be very healthy.
Now, I want to pivot and look at the Knights as well, and maybe right on the back of something Ducky talked about in that interview. You look at Scary D. Do you think that matchup maybe goes the way Ducky thinks that it is, where Scary D maybe just has that edge in the solo lane?
I mean, I've personally teamed with Scary D, and I had a similar experience as Ducky did with Inbound, in that Scary D was very hard for me to pull back. He would continually go in and he would attack, and you would literally have to beg him to stop. So if Scary can get his ball rolling and really start to put the kibosh into Ducky, it's going to be hard to stop that pressure from continually flowing out. But if Ducky says that he's willing to play back and safe in lane and show a lot of respect there, it's going to be hard for Scary D to find those dives. And I imagine if they know that he's going to be playing aggressive, Weekend should be in the wings ready to get any sort of counter engagement going.
I am curious, Mifflin. Obviously a big conversation about Obey has been around Inbound. Do you think there's a big difference maybe in this matchup between NeilMah in that Guardian role? I think NeilMah, a fantastic player, Inbound as well. But do you think there's a play style difference there, maybe a mechanical skill difference as a point that the Knights will be able to take advantage of?
I think that both of those players are known for their aggressiveness. Neil, a little bit more refined in his play style, tries to go a little bit aggressive, but he is going to be able to pull back when he needs to. I don't think that he necessarily needs the majority of his team yelling at him like Inbound does. But I think that if Inbound continues to play as aggressively as he did last week, he will see a lot more pressure onto himself, which might be decent. That's how he played on Hype Unit when he was on the Xbox. He would be the lightning rod for all the aggression on his team, and it would allow these hyper carry players to farm out and get him into that late game. So maybe if that's the plan, power to him. It's going to fit his playstyle perfectly, but I would like to see him reel it in a little bit, as Ducky was asking for, and maybe play a little bit more smart.
And NeilMah, obviously world champion, same out of 4 out of 5 members of this Pittsburgh Knights roster, and wouldn't you guess it, we had NeilMah sit down and talk to us about this matchup versus Obey.
Well, I'm here with Neil, support for the Knights, defending world champion Neil, I feel like I should say. And Neil, I want to ask you first about last week. I'm sure you don't want to talk too much about it, but talk to me a little bit about what happened. I mean, you guys had the crazy base race and everything. It was so close. How are you guys planning on bouncing back from that set?
Yeah, the set against Radiance is a little bit unfortunate, I think. I think that in the second game especially, we kind of took one bad fight, and that's kind of Smite. Sometimes you just lose off of one fight, and I think that we probably didn't draft or play the way we should have. I think we kind of just got caught up in trying something kind of on the fly, which isn't really something you should do. It wasn't really something we practiced too much, so I think we kind of got enamored and kind of beat ourselves a little bit. Not to take away anything from them. I think they played really well, but I think that we didn't do ourselves any favors either. But I think this week we're just going to plan on kind of doing things we've done in practice more so, just trying to stick to something a little bit more planned, I guess, yeah. And I think Obey, they're not a team to be taken lightly. I don't think any team is, but I think it'll be good for us to kind of bounce back and show everyone what we can do. And when we have a little bit more of a plan, what's gonna happen to the rest of the league. So.
Yeah, I mean, it might not look like it on the scorecard, but they were really close games, both of them, right? And you were really even ahead in game one, so I know that you guys can bounce back. You're going to be matching up against Inbound in particular, though, right? Against Obey in the support role, and he is so aggressive. He loves to dive, get into the thick of things right from minute one. How are you going to kind of match his pace, or are you guys maybe just going to let him sort of hang himself, so to speak, by getting too aggressive?
I don't think we're really game planning for any one player in particular. I think that there are a lot of aggressive sports in the league, so it's not really anything new. I just think that maybe I'll call him in Discord before and give him a little Bobby, something like that. Just, keep him on his toes. But I don't know. Bobby's a good guy, a great player, and I don't think we're really game planning for anyone. I think that it's something to keep in mind for sure that he might pick something aggressive, like I think he played Fender last week. Just something to keep in mind, picks and bans, but nothing really that I'm going to be trying to play around too much. I think we're just going to try and play our own game more so.
Well, how's the squad meshing around Qvo? I mean, I know that's kind of the one swap for you all is that jungle role. How do you all feel like the squad's kind of meshing around him?
I think that everything's going really well. I think in week one and maybe a couple weeks ago in practice, we're having a little bit of trouble, I guess, meshing. But I think over the last couple of weeks, we've come a long way, especially just in how we want to play the map and how we want to team fight. And I think it's kind of more reminiscent to last season than the year where everyone's kind of on the same page and everybody knows what their job is. So far, so good with Fred, and I think it's only onwards and upwards from here.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. Good luck in your matches. I'm looking forward to seeing Neil out there on the battleground.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It's a great mindset for NeilMah and the rest of the Knights to have. Week one, you're going up against a very, very strong team in Radiance, but you can't shrug off Obey at this point. Any team in this league can absolutely find themselves some wins. And I think you would probably agree with some of those statements as well, Mifflin, that the Knights just need to get back to playing their game and put their best foot forward instead of playing maybe as reactionary as they did in week one.
Yeah, I like that evaluation. PK knows that they're a roster that are capable of greatness, so I think getting in your own head is the only thing that could really hold them back. So it seems like from that interview, they've got a base level of confidence that they are able to play their own game. They're going to win no matter who it is. And I think that's a great place to be in. I'm a huge proponent of teams finding their own sort of dynamic, their own true game plan, their own identity, if you would. And if PK's got it, they're going to have it, and I think it's something to be worried about if I'm on Obey.
Well, some of that Obey identity is, of course, in that support role, and I wonder if any of that trickles in here to picks and bans. Obviously, NeilMah saying that the Knights are going to be prepared for Inbound to play something a little bit different, a little bit more aggressive, but I don't think there's anything tried and true enough just yet that Inbound plays that would maybe warrant a full and complete ban by the Knights.
I think even if you are forcing all of your bans on a one character like Inbound, even he is the one with the most defined playstyle, and it is that unbridled aggression. If PK were to focus too many bans on him, it could let too much through. So I think, again, that's playing into the fact that they're willing to play their own game and not worry too much about Bobby. I think that's huge for them. That's already a win in the mental. And we see that the bans are going to be pretty standard here. Hell, Yamoja banned out by Obey, Surket and Jormungandr by PK. All guys that have been highly valued through the SPL.
I do have to ask, though, Mifflin, and you bring up the Hell, and, maybe it's because she was so not really picked maybe a little bit in the pre-weeks leading into the SPL. Why are we now seeing her just suddenly insta-banned effectively in every set?
It's likely to do with the fact that these games have been going a lot longer than we saw in Season 6. We're seeing 30-minute bangers, 45-minute games, stuff like that. And if the game's going to go that long, you might as well pick a god that's going to flourish in that late-game phase, and that is Hell. She brings this huge damage output as well as the healing for sustained longer team fights. So I think banning her out is going to be pretty decent there, as well as we've seen a shift towards healing in general. Yamoja's a top pick. Aphrodite's seeing a lot of play. We're seeing Horus picked up now. It seems like we're really moving into a more healer-centric meta.
Right. And Aphrodite just played in Game 2 of set number 1 today. King Arthur banned out by the Knights, and as Ducky brought up in his interview, Scary D is one that will play that Camazotz. I think anyone would in that solo lane if Camazotz makes it through. But I think an interesting point to make is this is not guaranteed to be a solo lane Camazotz just yet. There's enough flexibility in that god, at least between solo and jungle, that the Knights could still have a separate pick up their sleeve.
That is smart to point out. Camazotz getting picked up early really doesn't show your hand at all, besides the fact that you have a Camazotz. As you said, it could go solo, it could go towards the jungle. We've even seen it played occasionally at the lower level in that long lane, so it could go just about anywhere. And this Odin, continuing that flex pick mentality, he could jungle, he could solo as well, so Obey might try and shift their focus towards banning out Hunters on the second ban phase instead of looking towards Guardians, because Odin could be played in that support role, he could be played in solo. We just don't know yet.
What do you make of the Hercules and Thor locked in, though, for Obey? I mean, that just kind of yells aggression to me, which is maybe what we've come to expect here from Obey. I mean, the moment that Anvil of Dawn is leveled up into, expect it to be used. Hercules can provide some good initiation, some good damage as well. What do you make of those two picks, and why maybe first overall there for Obey?
I'll break it down in pieces, right? Let's take this Hercules.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you brought him up because it completely glossed over my mind because it made so much sense to me that Obey is going to be focusing this Hercules pick simply because of what we've seen from Inbound. That's the traditional aggressive support. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a level 1 invade around that speed buff from Bobby just running it down there. But that Thor pick, I do like a lot. It seems like Obey's been struggling in that mid-game teamfight phase and getting into the fights as a cohesive unit. Thor's going to be able to close that gap up just a little bit with the Anvil of Dawn. So if Wlfy gets picked up by PK, it's going to open up the door for Thor to find this huge dunk. Or even if he gets out-rotated a little bit, it will cover that gap as well. So I like all these picks so far. And the Raijin on Anhur, it's just, I'm seeing aggression. That's all I'm seeing from Obey right now. It seems like they're really going to lean into that early game aggressive play style.
Hey, if you can't beat him, join him. Obey are going to try to ban out some of those higher tier Hunters with their final two bans between the X-Ball and the Ullr, and then PK in turn are going to ban out the Huyi, but it's a Hachiman locked in here for the Knights. What do you make of that composition that the Knights have picked up for themselves? I mean, strictly looking at a tier list, they've got some good gods.
If we were on the Reddit right now, people would be losing their minds because all 5 of these picks are very near the top of that community tier list, but I love the draft. Odin's going to bring a lot of control in these team fights, as is Hunbots. If they use their ultimates in conjunction, it's a huge amount of lockdown. Camazotz is going to bring the sustain and damage as well as this backline dive, so it's going to be very easy for him to open the door for Merlin to find his damage in the enemy team's backline. And Hachiman, although doesn't really have a clear defined role in lane, he is one of the safest picks possible.
Well, the Knights might have to weather the storm that Obey could be bringing here in this early game. Both teams looking for a win. Game 1, let's go.
Thanks, Dolson and Mifflin. It's Finch and Gormizer as we move into game number 1 between the Knights and Obey. And nary a Guardian to be found on the map here. Instead, the Warriors will be handling the frontlining duties here, Gormizer. And Odin in particular, he's so permabanned right now, you don't even get used to seeing this guy come through anymore. But it's in NeilMah's very capable hands. How do you like these two drafts we're looking at?
Man, I'm trying to figure out which support's going to be more aggressive here. I mean, I know they covered it in the interviews, they covered it on the desk, and Neil and Inbound both like to play aggressive, but you don't get much more aggressive than a Hercules or an Odin. Odin having that long-range stun now, if you're not familiar with him in Season 7, it makes a huge difference in the duo lane. And then Hercules is Hercules, a knockback, a pushback, whatever the amount of control. As long as Inbound can hit his abilities in late game, then you can expect some deaths to be coming out. And I hope you're ready, Finch, because this feels like it should be a high-kill game with how aggressive these teams want to play.
And then potentially a high kill long lane as well here in duo. As I noticed in the first set, we're getting a traditional duo lane back, aren't we? None of these supports doing any aggressive invades. Inbound slowed, taking a bunch of early damage. First blood for NeilMah as he shuts down Inbound, and Pittsburgh Knights get on the board first. And that can happen with all this aggression that's been picked. Bobby's got to make sure he's being a bit more careful.
Yeah, it's going to be moments like that. I mean, if Wowy hits to level 3, 4, even before he has his ult online, his kill potential skyrockets, right? Being able to get the pillar stun or try and line him up with the wall when Inbound is there. But right now, this is a dangerous position. I like the stun from Neil, but I don't know. They're still in danger.
No, that's so clean from the Knights, dude. They get in there perfectly. Bobby returns as fast as possible. I assume he driving strikes out of base. He blinks to catch up. And then NeilMah lands the perfect spear to stun him for the confirmation on the buff as well. And then the Knights played this cleanly. I think that NeilMah was the one in particular who really elevated his gameplay as part of their Worlds run. I think he was the one that stepped up the most for them and really would have been second to Sam for me in my voting for the MVP. And Neil's showing us some of that now just with this early game, properly punishing Inbound and getting off to a really good start.
especially with how aggressive someone like Inbound needs to be. Now that he's behind, even more so, right? They need a pick, they need a kill, they maybe just need a gank to try and set them up. But if Neil can continually hit these stuns, especially right after a knock-up from Inbound, or potentially grabbing him like in the middle of a driving strike, just making him waste those cooldowns and essentially turn Inbound's aggression against him, stun him out now that he's out of position and lock him down, those moments are going to determine this duo lane. And the fact that you're going to be able to help get Zap ahead is exactly what Zap wants, right? I mean, he wants to be able to play loose and free, and the best way for him to do that is if he has a 2-level lead over Wowy, both of them mechanically solid, but if you can let Zap have that lead and continue to just kind of bang out that lane and continue getting wins in either 1v1s or just farming wins, then it's all going to go smooth on the left side of the map. And then you have to turn your eyes towards like the Scary D Ducky matchup and how that one's going to see where exactly Knights and Obey are going to maybe break apart.
I mean, that's a good point. Weekend has struggled, right, for Obey. So let's say that Zapman does continue to get a lead and you take the left lane out as a viable gank option for him, sort of as you're alluding to, then where does Weekend end up going? That's how things get harder for your jungler. It's not just your jungler being bad at Smite. These junglers are all excellent, right? What's happening is that when your side lanes are losing all the time, there are less viable options for you to go, and the jungle really struggles in that kind of situation. So I think that you're right. It's important in the long lane, not just because Zapman gets ahead, but because it could have this cascading effect down to make life harder on Weekend.
And it's this awkward spot, like, I mean, you're Thor, right? You have a pretty decent amount of damage, but you're not, like, the guy who's going to solo carry the entire game. You have so much setup and so much damage to enable everyone on your team, but who are you going to gank? The Camazotz that's going to heal everything really fast? Or maybe, if the duo lane keeps going this way, the guy who's got a level advantage. Like, it just becomes difficult to decide. Then you're almost locked into mid, and it's moments like that where the decision-making, I think, for Obey are going to be very big. And that's looking, 10 minutes, 15 minutes even into the future for them. So they still have a good chance to maybe try and divert this back onto the rails for themselves. But you have to figure out where you want to put that effort, because again, Scary D is not going to have a lot of issues. I think you'd have to get rid of Zapman.
That's a big pull into the Impale. Zapman in some trouble. Never uses beads anywhere in that. Is calm that he'll be able to make it out. Neil gives him the information to come all the way back around the safe way. Now he steps up, not worried about potentially getting pulled here again. But this is what makes the Knights so tough. Even when you do find some good execution, they do not blink. They don't show any nervousness. NeilMah now pinned. The Impale, or rather the Leap, comes in to keep the CC chain going. There is no Impale. NeilMah makes out. He steps in again, uses the Horrific, and he ends up paying for it. Wowy finds the Impale, but that's because QvoFred was rotating in. But without an ult, there's just not a lot he can do here, and Obey end up getting away with one.
Oh, now Weekend's in the jungle. He's looking for something, and they don't need to find too much out of this. Getting that kill, getting this pressure is going to be solid, but there's going to be a solo kill. Scary D's pretty deep on the right-hand side.
Yeah, finds that kill on the Ducky, and that can happen, man. Amaterasu does not have a lot of pressure early in the game, and Camazotz has pressure always. And I feel a bit bad for that. I asked Ducky in the interview, am I going to get any solo kills from you onto Scary? And he said, no, likely it'll happen the other way around, and unfortunately, that's how it started.
And that's just going to be the prowess. They mentioned it on the desk coming into this. You have 4 picks on the Knights that are often banned, sometimes banned every game like that we have seen. We have Odin kind of slipping through, even though he's been missed for a little bit. NeilMah's showing why he's been so potent. It's what he can do early on, even in moments like this where they're going to get aggressive.
Well, everyone's slowed. You just cannot miss that ultimate, and Zapman gets one of the easiest kills of his life. They actually hit both Wowy and Inbound and forced Inbound out. And this is a tough start now, Gore, for this long lane, right? I mean, Inbound needs to be able... The whole reason you're picking this Hercules is so that you could be the one that's rotating around the map, applying all this extra pressure, being another sort of kill force, and engage source for your team. I don't know if he can be that if he ends up falling behind like this.
And that, I think, is the biggest thing, right? You need someone who's going to be able to be pressure for you. And I think on both sides, you have someone that you can rely on, right? Last week, we didn't see Wlfy, even though we had mentioned, and Weekend had mentioned that they wanted to kind of play around Wlfy. It seemed like Wowy was the one more or less stepping into that role. Wlfy playing things like Nuwa, being a little bit more utility. Here on the Raijin has a little bit more potential to carry. But you look at Paul, he's going to be able to burn things down. But you can fall back on Qvo, you can fall back on Zapman, and if Zapman's going to be comfortable in the lane, look, the guy's been playing Smite for 8 years. There's a reason he still has his beads, even though he was stun-locked against a wall just a couple of minutes ago. It's just, he has a temperament around him where he recognizes, like, he just has to play Smite. He's in a zone. and then everyone else around his team can get aggressive. If Neil gets aggressive, Zap can go in and play with him. And that kind of synergy that the Knights have going in with them for this year, I think is just going to cause Obey to be playing off just slightly off kilter, right? Just a little bit off pace from where they want to be.
Weekend has spent a lot of time in about that exact spot that he's in right now. He was here in time, I think, for the red buff invade. Didn't look for it. Didn't look for this gank either. There's really not a lot of farm up for him on his side of the map, so I don't think he's wasting time, so to speak. But he certainly was looking for something, and the Knights stayed defensive underneath their tier 1 with their positioning, so he didn't find anything there, and he ends up rejoining Wlfy. It's just a bit curious. I was expecting there might be some kind of gank there, but instead Weekend just kind of ends up nearby, and it's just not. It doesn't materialize for him.
It was a very interesting dynamic we saw last week out of Obey and out of the Knights, honestly. Both Qvo and Weekend kind of farmed more than they went for any ganks, than any kind of frags they were looking for, which is a little slower pace than I think either of us would expect out of these two junglers. And I've seen Qvo like kind of poking his head into the lane, but even now you see him like, okay, cool, I'm going to come split this wave, then I'm going to go back to the camps, then I'm going to go to this camp. Like, it's just very methodical right now, focused on the farm. And it's very similar to what we got to see, I would argue, out of like an EU meta if you go to years past when we were online in Europe, where it's just farm until you get to 20 minutes and all of a sudden whoever wins that fight gets the next big objective.
Scary could be in some trouble. He's been aggressive all game, but in comes Weekend to try and help out. The wall's done good. The silence keeps the CC chain going. He leaps for the heal. Now uses Bat out of hell for the disengage. QvoFred is here, and meanwhile, NeilMah gets the kill on the Wowy. Qvo has to use the Fear No Evil for Peel, but Scary D's in trouble. No, Weekend instead dunks onto the full HP QvoFred. Some follow-up damage comes through, and Weekend ends up paying for it. QvoFred gets the kill, plus they got the one on Wowy in long lane.
That goes about as poorly for Obey as you can imagine, and it's not anything they necessarily did. That is the Knights playing together in any way possible. Scary D, again, on this Camazotz is going to be difficult to kill. That is the essence of Camazotz. The fact that they're willing to throw a Fear No Evil just to peel for him, Weekend just being outside of range, not being able to dunk onto Scary D, forced to go on Qvo. Maybe you just don't go in there, right? Maybe that's the only decision you can make, but at that point, you've committed to this gank, you want something. And unfortunately, Paul and Neil happen to be rotating as well. Like, there's just too much going on from the Knights. Reading those calls coming into it, it just opened up the door. And like you said, since they got that kill onto Wowy, it's nothing but a net win for the Knights. And now they've found themselves a really solid lead for 8 minutes.
This is a brutal start for Obey. I mean, I don't know any other way to kind of put it, Gormizer. Scary D forces their hand by moving up. And by the way, if you're playing your games at home in solo lane and you have pressure and you're just kind of standing in solo, you're doing it wrong. You do want to proxy the way that Scary does. You do want to force people to rotate, and that's how you exert your pressure on the map. And that's exactly what Scary does. He forces Weekend to rotate when he doesn't really want to, force him to make a tough decision where there really isn't much winning. And Pittsburgh Knights, with the rotations coming, end up being on top. I think that Scary has played this game really well. So has Neil, for my money, too, on this Odin so far, and Obey haven't been able to answer so far these first 9 minutes.
I mean, you can tell that they're playing incredibly well. Scary has a level lead, and that's going to be one thing. About a level and a half, almost 2 levels for QvoFred in the jungle, which is making a huge difference as to where we can see Weekend be impactful. But because the duo lane's so far ahead, Cherio can look, or QvoFred, sorry, can look anywhere he wants to, even onto Wlfy.
QvoFred might be able to get it. The Taiko drums would have put the fear into QvoFred, but he had the beads on tap and ready. Gets right through him and shuts down Wlfy. That's Wlfy's first death of the game. Now it's a red buff invade for the Knights as QvoFred takes that one quite cleanly. Neil steps up to make sure Wowy cannot come in to contest, and Pittsburgh Knights just control the whole map. It's a 5,000 gold lead, nearly 5,000, 9.5 minutes in.
Man, Finch, this is exactly what you expect. When you go for a composition that wants to be aggressive, much like the Knights have, then it wins even harder from ahead, right? You get this huge of a lead, and then you pull a Gold Fury like it's nothing. You have Scary D zoning 2 on his own on the right-hand side. Like, you get this 5,000 gold lead, and you are not scared of anything. The problem is Obey, also with a very aggressive draft, are feeling the downside of it, which is if you fall behind, it hurts. You don't necessarily have a Guardian who's easily capable of jumping in and setting kills up for you, and because Inbound is going to be just, at this point, just as easy of a target as pretty much anybody else on the team, it's difficult to find these picks and find the fights they need to for Obey to get back in. Objectives around Pyro, around, well, unfortunately for them, a Gold Fury that's now gone. Fire Giant, those are going to be the big pillars that can turn the game back in their favor. but they have to be present for him, and that last Gold Fury just went completely either under the radar or they just recognized that maybe they can't win that fight.
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, they could not make the call to get in there, and the Knights end up grabbing the first Fury of the game. I like the way you break down the difference in the aggression here, though. These are both aggressive comps, as Odin showing you can hold that Gungnir's Might for the stun until you need it, by the way. But I don't think that Obey are as aggressive, right? Raijin, we talk about all the time, struggles in the early game. Amaterasu does too. And that's it. Everything else on Obey's draft is aggressive. It's just that that's not enough because everything on the Knights draft is aggressive, right? Everything on the Knights draft is ready to start fighting right away. And it's really worked for them in the early game. And that first kill into Inbound, I really do think that was really, really important for them because they've controlled this left side of the map. They forced Weaken to go look to try and help out in right, and that didn't work either because Scary had to lead with the Camazotz.
Yeah, it's again the glorious play that they've had from the first minute of this game has allowed QvoFred freedom that has then tightened the bracers around Weaken's wrist, right? Like he cannot go anywhere or else you'll run into something like that.
Oh, at my speed buff, an Unbots with Fear No Evil just for me? Fine, I guess. And this is why I think people give Weaken too hard of a time on this Obey roster. I'm not saying that he's played like really well or he hasn't had, what I'm saying is he hasn't had a chance to do anything yet this game. Right? I really just I don't think it comes down to him. It's that there's been so much pressure everywhere else that I don't know that he's had a ton of interaction points so far, and instead just getting bullied as Wlfy is forced to the ultimate. Weaken comes back to try and help him, but you cannot peel Bat out of hell. That's good damage. Wlfy manages to survive. Inbound has to use the slow to try and get everyone away. Scary D's low too, but the flames from Paul burn too hot, and Inbound ends up falling.
Man, if Scary D walks out with that low health again, like I'm tilted if I'm Obey, right? Just because it's just he seems so easy to kill, but that's the problem that comes out of Camazotz. And again, I think that's going to be the thing I harp on the most this game. There's a reason we've seen a lot of people banning him in the top 6, and that is just because trying to kill him is a pain. And whether or not he gets the kill on you, he's zoning you out. I mean, Wlfy has no chance to even be a part of that fight because Scary D immediately goes in on him.
811 damage. Gore.
Yeah. You burn Paul's beads, that's a big win for you, but does it really matter if you're losing the kills 7-1, if you're down 6,000, almost 7,000 gold? Like, what do you do when you're having to deal with this Camazotz? And the answer is you have to commit 3 people to him and just hope that that's enough, and hope that you can win the follow-up fight after committing 3 people to 1 person.
You're exactly right. I love that you point out how well he zones Wlfy out of the fight. That's what has me looking down his player damage and how incredibly low it is. I mean, it's not as if there's a ton of damage from Paul either, right? But it's like, in that fight, there's just no way that Wlfy can step up and use that Taiko drum as part of that fight at all. He has to use it to barely keep himself alive. And it doesn't even really do that great of a job of that. He does end up living, but he has to go right back to base. So the Knights now firmly in control. It's about 7,000 gold or so that they're in the lead. They've already gotten every neutral objective that's on the map for now, so they've been reduced to stealing Alpha Harpies away from the Chaos side of the map. I mean, at this point, the Knights are doing just about whatever they want. And if Obey are going to win, to me, it's going to come down to like an overcommitment on an objective or something like that. Gore, do you see what's the path back in here for Obey?
Honestly, it is coming up around this Fury. Like, you see the pings coming out, you see the wards coming out. If you can win a fight around this Fury, even though it looks like it's going to be a Primal Fury, it's not going to, like, change the game state drastically. You just need something, right? A little bit of XP, a little bit of gold that can then translate to other objectives on the map. You win this one, all of a sudden maybe you can look at the tier 1 in left or the tier 1 in mid, right? It opens that door just enough for you to slip through. You lose this Fury, then, well, nothing necessarily goes worse for you. You just don't get anything back in. You have to wait for the Pyromancer or Fire Giant fight. Because otherwise, there's not a big grouping. There's not a chance to pick the Knights apart, other than maybe going for something on the left-hand side of the map. Because after that early aggression, we haven't really gotten to see anything out of Zapman and Wowy. They get a couple of kills here and there, and now that he's got a lead, he's just coasting with it.
Scary D has been locked down, but he still has the bat out of hell. So the Taiko drums comes out, and Scary D trades it for his own ultimate and makes it out of there. Again, like you said, even when they commit 2 members just to killing Scary D, it's not enough because he's level 16, the most farmed on the map right now, and he's just too hard to kill at this point. Now they won't have one of their best teamfight ultimates in the Taiko drums for this next Fury fight. I don't even know if Obey can stick around for it.
Well, and you pointed it out earlier, right? Now you have Wlfy back on par with kind of the rest of his team, at least, in terms of player damage. But that was the one thing, like, you see Scary D zoning him out, Wlfy wasn't able to do a ton of damage because of that. But when you look at it, normally the Warriors are supposed to be close. The solo laners are supposed to be close from boxing matches. There's a 7,000 damage gap between Scary D and
He's
Ducky,
kind of breaking the graph.
It's just, he's non-stop, relentless aggression coming from the solo laner. And even now, he's not even a part of this fight. He has his teleport coming up, he can get back in. He's going to push the tier 2 and help win the fight.
He should be able to threaten that tier 2 quite nicely. I don't think anyone can get over there and stop him, and that forces Obey's hand. They want to try and take the Primal with the 5v4 advantage, but they're really not even that favored in this fight. They haven't been to lock anyone down, and still Scary swings away. This forces the teleport out from Ducky, but Ducky, this is a hard defense. Now that the Knights know Ducky's missing, they step up to the Primal Fury and grab it. This is about as clean as you like, but it does come down to the execution on actually confirming it. They drop the objective. Inbound finds the pull and the push, brings him back in, but QvoFred gets away from some of it, but not all. Zapman gets the kill on the weaken, though, on the backside to make them punish. The fight rages on.
And they're doing whatever they can to try and stay aggressive, but the health bars are not looking good for Obey. That's going to be Wowy. Wlfy forced the beads out of there.
Paul does get that kill on the inbound. They want Wowy. Scary D does get impaled back, but Bat out of hell does not care. He ends up finding Wowy as well for their third kill. They make it a 3-for-1, and Wlfy, where you running, buddy? That's right to Scary D's waiting, clutches, grabs Wlfy quite nicely. The Primal Fury falls as well, and the Knights get a 4-for-1 plus the Fury.
And that's just, I mean, the Knights play heads up from minute 1, right? And it goes back to something that wasn't even a part of the fight. Scary D is where my eyes are at, because he gets a free, half of the tier 2 on right lane, still has his teleport available if they needed him in that fight over in the Knights. And he was able to walk over and engage and help clean up some of those kills. Didn't have to use the teleport at all, so he has it available to him now to, well, you guessed it, keep being aggressive and keep fighting and extend that player damage lead that he has. And then there's a couple of things that just go wrong for Obey, and my eyes unfortunately had to go to Weaken. There was a big opportunity for his ult to maybe land down on someone like Paul on Zap to cause some distress in the backline, and it threaded the needle right between everybody. It didn't connect, it didn't get the stun, and then he was just out of position, so it was easier for the Knights to capitalize and get that kill because Obey were just so split up. And that's the problem I'm having now. They're not playing together enough, because you need 3 or 4 people to try and deal with Scary D. You're going to need 2 to 3 people to deal with anybody else on the Knights. You got to play together, and you got to start looking at the objectives. The vision was really good a couple of minutes ago for him, but the wards have all but disappeared for Obey.
Wlfy takes quite a bit of damage, gets out of there. Zapman soloed the Pyromancer as well while all the rest of the action was going down, so another neutral objective for the Knights. They'll now threaten the tier 2 tower that Scary set up for them earlier, and by threaten I mean they will take it. Obey have no say in that matter. They're up 12,000 gold, 60,000 experience. The largest gap, I know they're not compared across roles, but just to give you an idea, Scary D is like level 19, yep, and Inbound's level 10. To give an idea of just how far behind Inbound is at this point in terms of relative to the rest of the map. And Scary D continues the aggression. Wlfy can't even exist on the map. Scary still has the bat out of hell, but he's got the whole team with him. Meanwhile, his squad does the Fire Giant. Obey, at this point, are just outmatched.
Now, I'm just going to tell you, anyone watching this, right, put yourself in Scary D's shoes. It is very rare that your presence alone can command a team away from Fire Giant. Like, you on your own are enough distraction to let your team get a free Fire Giant. That does not happen in-game, but that's how far ahead Scary D is right now. If I'm looking at problems Obey need to deal with, I may be rewinding time and banning out a Camazotz, because Scary D is just a monster. But this is the only issue, like, again, with Knights, sometimes Scary D doesn't have this performance, right? So maybe you don't get him being this absolute monster, but everyone on the team right now has been playing very clean, from Zapman to Paul to Qvo. There's been a couple of, well, literally just a couple of kills Obey have been able to pick up where they were maybe slightly out of position and they finally got their ults to hit the right way. But if you get something like Scary D, 3-level lead over the Amaterasu, and like you had said, right now 8 levels, it just goes down a little bit since he's capped at 20 now, over the support, just having that wide of a berth from Obey. He is a mess, and there's not much else you can do with it. J. Jonah Jameson wants, pictures to run in the newspaper to make sure that Scary D's terrible, because there's just nothing you can do to control him outside of hope he makes a mistake at this point.
Yeah, he is absolutely beyond restraint at this point, right? You're not going to be able to bring him back in. And now Obey might get collapsed on. Ducky was the one that was left without a seat in this awful game of musical chairs. Ducky now being locked down. Goes to the dabbling offensive, but the cage gets dropped. They put a ring on it, and Ducky can't make it out of there. And, you know, it's so funny that you bring up Scary D and his impact, because I say that it was Neil that stepped up big for them at Worlds. But if you ask anyone from the SK roster, whenever I talk to them, they all said that it was Belair. They all said it was Scary D that they really thought stepped up and played out of his mind for them in that big run for them to get their win towards Worlds. So I think what that really means is that you don't win Worlds unless everybody steps up and has a really strong performance. But it does go to show, right, that they really thought it was that Scary D can have these kind of games, and that he did as part of their Worlds run.
And it's that thread, right? How do you go from a team like last year who spent pretty much the entire year at the bottom of the standings to a world championship? And like in a weekend, maybe all 5 of you have a good week, but how do you make it consistent? That's what they're trying to do. Not make it lightning in a bottle. They want to go in.
They want to have it be more consistent, Gormizer. You're right. They get a lot of ultimates out from Obey there from this aggression. Thundercrash forces the bat out of hell from Scary, but he just repositions the few no evil zones everyone out. Meanwhile, the squad comes back to the right side. Phoenix below half HP. Dazzling offensive is good, should find, but doesn't actually get any kind of stun. So the Knights just back up. They regroup, ready to push again.
And that Phoenix is really low, though, Finch. And they still have like a minute of Fire Giant. Scary D's going to be able to teleport right back in. So you get the best of both worlds. Now he's full health and able to get back in there. I want to look for this aggression, but it's so difficult to break this siege, especially because you have to deal with stuns coming out from Weekend. Still has his ult, can still go in the backline. Paul and Zapman might still be in danger.
NeilMah gets a couple members in the cage, and Scary D gets the kill. Inbound is the one that falls first. Ducky taking too much damage. Up onto the horse goes Zapman, and Ducky goes down. It's a 5v3 in their favor. Weekend finds one with the stun, but can't do anything after it. He gets caught in the blizzard from Paul, as it ends up being too much. Make it a double kill. It's just Wlfy left, and there's no way for him to defend up against the entirety of the Pittsburgh Knights. They're farming in the fountain. They want the D aside as they shut down Obey for game 1.
Yeah, that was, I want to say less of a win, more of a statement from the Knights, right? Like, there's a certain point where you're like, okay, cool, we win. Sanguine won, right? That was, no, we are here to play. This was something different from the Knights. I mean, from the first minute, you could tell they wanted to be aggressive. The drafts told us that. But they took those small little advantages they won across the map and just dialed it up to 11 throughout that game. I mean, when was there a single point that they were falling behind? Like, the closest I think I saw that game was maybe 500 gold after that first blood bounty. Otherwise, it was thousands and thousands in favor of the Knights. They just read the map, they played the objectives incredibly well, and the team fights all went their way.
They played cleanly. I think you could tell that this team was unhappy with the way that week 1 went. They came out and gave us a clean performance here, but that's only game 1. Obey can obviously still bounce back in game 2 and potentially beyond. But let's get it back over to the desk. We'll have Dolson break it down.
The week 1 to week 2 bounce back for the Knights is brutal if you're on the receiving end, and that's Obey this time around. Clean, concise from start to finish. I don't think the Knights stepped off the gas pedal that entire game. Mifflin's still with me to break this one down. Good luck breaking it down, though, Mifflin, because I think that is about as clean a game of SMITE as you can maybe get. And the Knights did not look like they would be denied 1 death on Fred, 1 death on Neil, and that's it.
Yeah, this is the point where I would normally go into the game, say what Obey would need to work on in order to shift the focus into game 2 and really break down where the leads happened.
Right.
But I don't think I could say anything that the viewers in chat didn't already see. It was so cut and dry. PK came out of the woodwork swinging hard, haymakers left and right. And every single blow landed. They said they wanted to play their own game, and they absolutely did. I mean, that was clinical. It was clean. I want to say what needs to change, but truthfully, a lot needs to change. The only thing Obey can do going forward is forget that match even happened and just try and bring it back this game in a completely different style.
Well, you know, a game like that, maybe it's honestly easier to kind of break it down pick band style. Like, you pick a Camazotz because he can do this. You pick a Hunbatz because he can do Y. You pick an Odin because he can do Z. Literally every reason you would pick one of the gods for the Knights is what they ended up doing this game. None maybe more so than Scary D on this Camazotz. Top damage in the game. And you want to talk about an offensive onslaught. Ducky in his interview figured he would find it, but I'm not sure him or the rest of Obey expected what we saw from Scary D.
Yeah, I said in that pregame that it was hard for me to reel Scary D back in, right? To reel in Belair, to make him stop playing as aggressively as he had been. But it seems like he doesn't need to be stopped. He can do whatever he wants, and it's going to work out. There are two avenues of thought for Soul Laners, right? You can continue to put pressure in your lane and bring people to you, or you can rotate out with a lead and bring yourself to the rest of the game. Scary D did both. He played between Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower. He played behind the Tier 2 tower. He's on their Phoenix. People came over to him. He either killed them or got out alive. Or, if he was bored of that, he'd rotate out and kill Obey somewhere else on the map. It didn't really matter to Scary D what was happening. And that's what Camazotz can bring. That unbridled aggression, that raw survivability, that sustain. All of that is something that Camazotz has in spades. So I imagine we do see Obey ban it out, and it wouldn't be the wrong answer. It's only right. You can't let Scary D do that again.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're Obey, I mean, again, I still think there are some building blocks there that maybe are positives to kind of build on. But if you look towards picks and bans here for Game 2, I mean, I think either you need to pick the premier counter-aggressive composition that you can, or take away all of the aggressive picks that the Knights are going to find. It is still going to be a hell first band out here. I would be very surprised, though, if Obey don't ban out the Camazotz and then also don't pick him first overall. But I think the Knights, sensing that coming, are going to take the Camazotz away. So at least for Scary D, a different look in that solo lane.
Yeah, he's going to play something along the same lines, I imagine. Just that aggressive playstyle is something that we've come to know and love about Scary D. I like Obey's thought process here. They're going to ban out the Thor, ban out the Hell. Paul's so comfortable on that god. These are standard picks. But it's really not going to come down to P's and B's. I don't want Obey to change their playstyle. I think they have that clear, defined characteristic that it is aggression. I think you just have to completely all in on it and pray that you do win the early game. You have to win the early game because it's all you guys have as a cohesive unit. It's your true identity as a squad, and I don't think you can give it up now.
I agree. I think, and that's sort of what I mean when I say that Obey has some of those building blocks, and if they can kind of come together and make a sculpture of some sort, maybe it's on the back of some of that aggression that this team has. 6 bans in here for both sides. Anything jump out at you that's maybe made it through these first 6 bans that one of these two teams should be leaping towards?
Obey could lean in towards this Persephone. Oh, we love to see that. The Persephone is a highly aggressive pick in that mid lane, able to poke people out from far away, as well as lock them down. So if we see some support rotations, maybe we even see a Hercules picked up again by Bobby, that could be good. I imagine we see PK look at the Odin or something like along those lines, some more aggressive picks over there as well. I mean, it's... Oh, I write the script, guys. It really is. It's all me.
Let's go, Myth. Let's go. Yeah, Persephone right into the Odin. Works every time. Odin's still on that 100% win rate. I think worth noting that Persephone has been banned out in 100% of the SPL games so far. This will be the first time we have been allowed to see her in this game as Obey pick her up first overall. So what kind of a difference do you hope to see out of Persephone? Obviously a high skill ceiling. I mean, you have to be so mechanically strong to play a god like Persephone, but because she brings so much to the table and can turn a lot of these games around.
I would like to see Wlfy play a little bit further back than we saw last game. And he could do that with Persephone without sacrificing damage, because Persephone is truly one of the best snipers in all of SMITE. Her damage output is so high from so far away, as well as the self-sustain. If he does get picked or poked out, rather, he should be able to heal it up. He should be able to lock down enemies from anywhere on the map. I love the Persephone pickup. She really, truly doesn't have a weak phase in the game either. The second she hits level 5, she's online, and that's what Obey needs, because they are looking for that constant aggression in their 3v3 in mid.
I agree, and I think a big boon to their aggressive cause is King Arthur making his way through as well, banned out by the Knights in Game 1, but now Ducky's going to get his chance to play the aggressive solo lane god here in Game number 2. I think Hebo worth mentioning here, Mifflin. We've seen him trickled into a few of these games here and there. What are your hopes and aspirations for this Hebo here for the Knights?
Well, I'm hoping that it's Paul piloting that Hebo, but both gods picked up, Ullr and Hebo, are Paul's signature gods. So those could flex either way. We could see Hebo in the long lane with Zapman. We could see Ullr in mid. We could see it reversed either way. So I do like this pick because it's going to keep Obey on their toes. But either way, both of them are incredibly aggressive. I imagine we're going to see a lot of jumping in from the Ullr. Hebo's going to be able to play up the second he hits level 5, especially considering now that There's lifesteal on Shoes of the Magi. Hebo's going to get a slight buff there because he doesn't really benefit from CDR quite as much as the other mages, and is going to give him that level of sustain that he didn't have a couple weeks ago.
And I look at kind of the lockdown and the setup that the Knights already have throughout their first few picks. I mean, you talk about Odin stun, Ullr stun, Hebo knock up, Amaterasu with her ultimate grab some crowd control as well. The Knights, I think, have drafted themselves a good composition here to find some lockdown and really start to transform some of these fights to be advantageous for themselves. Obey, on the other hand, they are going to swing towards that Kuzenbo, and a god that we saw, I mean, I would say mitigated success from this morning for Space Station Gaming, picked up twice by Raffer, no wins, but in those games, I would say Kuzenbo didn't look horrible.
I do like the Kuzenbo pickup simply because of how much it meshes with Bobby's playstyle. If he wants to move up and get aggressive, he's going to be able to reflect some of that damage back, and we do see a lot of aggression landing onto Inbound. So if you're going to get hit, you might as well get a little bit rewarded for it, and that's something that Kuzenbo can bring. As well with the CC immunity and mobility that Kuzenbo brings, maybe if he does get picked out like he has been, he's going to be able to play around it a little bit better. Pele picked up from PK. That's a potent roster, man. Pittsburgh Knights, they found something good here.
And I know we like the Knights roster, but if you look over towards Obey, are you excited about the 5 they've brought here into Game 2?
I do. I think they've got a lot that they can work with. I mean, if you leave Wlfy alone on Anhur, he should be able to fight into the Ullr or the Hebo, whichever one, insofar as he doesn't fall too far behind. So I think Obey definitely has a foot to stand on.
Well, it's time for Obey to try to even this one up, and it's also time for the Knights to find their first win here in Season 7 of the SPL, and that means it's time for Game 2.
All right, well, let's see if the Knights can close this one out, or if Obey will be the ones that shut them down. Sounds like we're leaning towards the Knights there, at least from what Mifflin was telling us from the analyst desk. What are you thinking, Gormizer? The Knights have come in well-equipped. Paul on Habois. I think this is about as signature Paul as you can get. It's what he dominated the minor league with and then came up to the SPL and still played at a high level. This is scary to me, even with Persephone, if I'm on the side of Obey.
I think it's going to be the difference of like calm, collected control that like Persephone can bring versus just hectic, I'm going to kill you real hard that Hebo brings, right? And it is that thing that Paul has. I think yesterday we got to see a little bit of what Lasber could do on this Pele. I'm excited to see what it can do in Qvo's hands. Well, Neil hasn't skipped a beat from last game. They're already pushed up against the purple bomb.
They're looking to try and invade. And this is really going to work. Zapman can start working on clearing this lane. Meanwhile, NeilMah can keep everyone zoned out. This is almost the same. That's a really good stun Neil hit there, too. But this is almost the same as what the supports were doing before anyway. He kind of keeps Wlfy out, doesn't let him do purple or the wave. It benefits Zapman, and now they can rotate back over to purple or even try and start this fight onto Inbound, who has been stunned, takes the bladed arrow, is now slowed by this horrific emblem, has to try and use the Alpha Harpy, but now he's body blocked in. I don't think there's a way that he can get out. He's been locked down. NeilMah finds the first blood.
All right, Finch, I'm going to ask you. All right, so you got a stun from Odin, then you get a stun from Ullr, and then for the second time now, Neil has gone for this horrific emblem to give you a slow. You get stunned twice, then slowed so you can't run away. If you're Inbound, like, I think I'm feeling pretty upset. I don't know about him. It's the opposite of how he wants to play, right? He wants to go fast, and the way Knights have drafted stops him from getting aggressive.
Yeah, I think Inbound has to show me an ability to say no to at least one fight at some point, man. He cannot take all of them, or he'll just end up dying like we're seeing happening from him. This is good, though. Inbound shows up towards this fight around the red buff and does help them establish some pressure. It's just not enough to keep the red buff up, and the Knights just steal that one away, and Paul can go back and grab his own red buff now too. So they haven't skipped a beat from last game. You said about Neil, but it's the whole squad. The Knights continuing their aggression.
And it's so dangerous, I would think, at least, in this kind of area, because, like, look at Paul's health. He's incredibly low, no mana. Habois can knock a ton backing you. But he's not necessarily known for the 100-0 turnaround at level 3, right? That's a level 20 when he's able to kind of hover around this area. So they have to be a little careful with that aggression. I think unbridled aggression that they had last time is going to get slowed down. Scary D still has some sustain, but it's not Camazotz level sustain. You still have a lot of damage and potential from this Pele, but maybe not quite as much as you'll have coming out of like a Fear No Evil from a Hunbat. So I expect we'll see the Knights maybe dial back a little bit this time, say for this duo lane, which doesn't seem to understand that the rest of the team is going to slow down. but you're not going to see them give up much of a lead because they're still controlling the way Obey play. Obey haven't gotten to play their game just yet because of the way that Knights have been drafting. And that's, I think, going to be the biggest difference. When they can start making the decisions and choosing when to engage instead of being forced to engage, we will start to see Obey shine. But as of right now, the Knights are just not going to let them.
No, they haven't really given Obey much room to breathe at all. And I think the big question for this set is going to be, is this Persephone enough value to make up for giving this Odin back over to Neil? And that's not quite fair, because if you don't take the Persephone, if you take the Odin, you give that over to Paul, and that's scary in its own right too. But that's how those two top picks end up lining up, right? So you kind of have to look at it that way. And I just don't know if Wlfy's going to be able to show us enough value in time before NeilMah has already dominated the left side of the map. Now they've completed yet another red buff invade and forced Wlfy away from more farm.
And just as much as you can get any single pick,
oh, no.
especially something in the solo lane if you can get a solo kill.
Very, very close. Ducky does manage to reposition on the tail lane, doesn't get caught by that dazzling offensive, but things now starting to already feel bleak if you're on the side of Obey Alliance. I mean, Inbound and Wowy haven't gotten to leave their tier 1 tower. We have not gotten to see Wlfy get a red buff yet this game as the Knights continue to strip that away. Scary D has reestablished pressure over in solo. And then these two junglers, there has been more impact from Qvo. He's been a part of the fights in mid, but again, they both haven't been supremely needed up until now.
And that's, I would argue, maybe the glorious thing, because both of their playstyle seems to be, especially this early on, get your ult, then see what you can do. Qvo actually looking to get caught out right here. Might end up getting it away, using the ult to run off.
Uses the Volcanic Lightning to reposition. Weaken tries to stay close, but they don't get this kill onto QvoFred. That's tough, man, because Qvo is so far out of position there. You have that Persephone ult to try and help lock him down as well, but they couldn't get the Grasp of Death to connect. They couldn't stay close enough there, Gore, and somehow Qvo wiggles his way out of there.
And it's one of those moments, if Weekend is able to get a little bit of farm before that engagement, he's level 5 and he has his ult to be able to throw out, right? Just something else to help lock him down. You unfortunately have Inbound right now at level 3, so it's not doing a lot, whereas Neil is level 5 chasing Weekend down at his speed buff right now. They're going for ganks on solo lane. The Knights don't care.
Yeah, Ducky being dove under the tier 1. They didn't quite have the damage to get him there, but it was close. I'm sure he wasn't feeling comfortable, as that was well played. And now Weekend could be in some trouble. He's trying to come with speed, but NeilMah's there. A good cage catches him, and NeilMah gets the dunk. This is what I'm talking about, man. This is the play, that level of play that got them to that World Championship, and it's what NeilMah's bringing into Season 7. I just love watching this guy play Smite, man.
And this is, Finch, this is the answer to the question I heard a lot throughout the offseason, which was, did the Knights just have a good weekend? Like, are they going to end up getting picked up and going forward in Season 7 and not being able to play at the same level that they did for that one World Championship run, which I guess you can also include the qualifiers and all that time like leading up to it.
Sure.
But, I mean, you look at the regular season, they were never there. Now they are absolutely showcasing what they have. Last week, I think we got to see that Radiance is very solid. Knights are proving they are not out of the running.
No, I think what we're really starting to see is that everyone has come to play at the SPL this year. I mean, Sang was one of those teams that I thought coming in, okay, they're going to be one of the teams on the bottom, and you don't have to worry about too much about the squad, but they've proven me wrong in that regard. Everybody is stepping up right now, and it just has me excited to watch these teams play, because we're always going to be seeing the best of the best push each other to the limit. But so far here, Gore, Obey might be at theirs, man. This has been really tough going for them. That's a good pillar. Wlfy buys himself some time, gets aggressive, knows that Inbound's on the way, but that might have been the wrong call. Does impale NeilMah against the wall. In comes the Kappa, and that's a big play from Wlfy, trusting Inbound to come in, and Obey are not ready to sit down yet.
It's a glorious turnaround. I think Wlfy reading the map really well, and NeilMah, I was kind of wondering as I watched it, I was just like, man, what's Inbound going to be able to do here? I think he maybe had something similar in his mind where it's just like, he was level 4 before that kill. Is he really going to be able to do too much to allow Wlfy to get the return kill? And if the answer is yes, it makes a big difference. It helps get a little bit less gap there between Wlfy and Zapman. So now Zapman's maybe a little more pressured out by this Anhur, who I think is going to be hitting, again, a good boxing area right now as he starts to finish up some items. But you're still looking at the control. That was a 4-man full rotation over to the duo lane. 2 of them were only necessary. You only needed the duo lane themselves, but you had Weekend, you had Wlfy both in the jungle ready to be able to jump in there. And so it's those moments like, okay, when are you going to be able to commit 4 people like that? Like, and is it worth it for the support that you're getting outside of the Knights?
Look at how they're converging on this red buff, though. This is so well timed from the Knights for yet another one of these buff invades. But Obey have brought 4 members to the party to try and defend, but they can't step in. Look, they're giving it up again. And this is tough now because I think Obey did the right thing. They had members there. They were a bit late. The Knights had the positioning that kind of baited them in a little bit. And now there's more action. Paul is locked inside this camp and uses the beads and the crushing wave, and Inbound gets flattened. Grasp of Death hits Casper as Paul finds the double kill to shut them down. They want another one. QvoFred goes forward to gobble up Wlfy, and the Knights starting to run over Obey.
Finch, do you ever see an amount of damage happen in just kind of one bout of a fight, and it still kind of like, it just blows you away? Because I know what Paul is capable of, right? Like, I know the damage numbers. I see the items with Bancroft's Talon and the boots. He's got enough lifesteal and power to melt anybody. And it still blows my mind how fast he was able to just melt people there. The way they're playing right now from the Knights isn't just pure, like, aggression, right? It's just so calculated in where they're finding their engagements. I say this, of course, as Neil is in the jungle surrounded by 4, but ignoring that one aspect, so much of what they've done has been calculated.
Well, NeilMah's running for his life here at this point, and Wlfy is able to find some damage to punish NeilMah on the back end. And this is what Obey are going to have to do a lot more of if they want to turn this set around, right? Is they've got to find some kind of way to make sure they're punishing Neil when he oversteps their Gormizer, or whomever it is that ends up going too far forward. They can't just let the Knights continue to take their jungle away from them for free. QvoFred and Scary have to start falling back and right. Ducky does enough to deter them, and they can at least defend their jungle a little bit.
Realistically, it is, like you said, Obey punishing Knights anytime they take something that aggressive, right? But you also have to look at the Knights, like, if I'm Neil, just slow it down just a little bit. Like, just, you know what I mean? Like, if you hit the brakes just slightly, you keep aggressive, but you're not diving their speed buff aggressive all the time, then you're still going to be able to find these fights, and it takes away the opportunities for Obey to find picks like that. I mean, even right here, Zapman reading the map really well, playing in just the distance that he can jump back to his tower line if he needs to, but knowing that he could turn the fight around if he gets a gank, which Neil is rotating over for. It's just those moments of recognizing and playing the play state of the game so well that the Knights were able to get such a massive lead last time, and so far cultivated themselves a 4,000 gold lead this time around, and that's about the same amount of gold where we saw them start to pressure that Gold Fury.
Yeah, it looks like Inbound being around was enough for them to give up on the Gold Fury entirely. I'm very surprised. I mean, they're up so much at this point. Maybe they don't want to risk a potential throw or giving the game back to Obey by letting that Gold Fury be stripped away there. Scary D catches up and does put some good damage into Weekend, but it's not enough to completely lock him down either, so they continue to move around the jungle, looking to strip some farms. Speed buff is about to start. Maybe they've got the timer on this. This is risky, though. A lot of people in blue, a lot of Order team members here to try and defend. It looks like it was stripped away. QvoFred uses Volcanic Lightning, doesn't find anyone, gets locked into the grasp of death, but in comes NeilMah. It's a 2-man stun from Scary D as well as they lock down Wicked. Scary makes it 1-for-1. Already on the way out is NeilMah, but Scary D isn't. He wants the double. Shuts down Wlfy as well.
Man, it felt like it was going to be an overcommit, and it still kind of feels like an overcommit. But it looks like the Knights are going to be able to walk away from this one. Not unscathed, they lose Qvo, but they're doing something that's very important. And it's realistically, you look at the level gap between the junglers, and it is 2 levels right now in favor of Qvo. They are stripping away the speed buff. They're making Weekend not get farm and not be impactful in these fights.
It's a good blink from Inbound. Does get the beads out, but it ends up costing his life for it in that last trade. The action rate is on as the Habois is able to find some good damage underneath the tier 1. They're continuing to look for their aggression, and they want this fight to keep happening. The Susano is there as well, but he ends up getting blown up. Paul shuts down Weekend quite nicely, and the Knights continue to answer whatever aggression, and these Grasp of Death just really have not been there from Wlfy. He's got to make sure these are connecting as the damage from Zapman too much. Paul gets the kill, but that was all hail of arrows, bladed arrow to shut him down.
And, you know, I'm happy we have that replay, mainly because whatever length that was, that is how fast it took Weekend to respawn, run in, and die again. Because he was dead when we went into it and dead when we got back to it. It's just those moments, right? When you're the jungler, that's where I would argue more of the impact should be felt, right? Your ganks are going to either enable your team to get kills or enable you to get kills. Paul is 5-0 right now, and while some of it is Paul, it's because Neil and Qvo are helping him set up these kills and find out picks throughout the map. And unfortunately, I mean, you're 1-3 if you're Wlfy, you're 1-4 if you're Weekend. Both of them 2 or 3 levels behind right now. It's just, you have to start taking better fights. It's very similar to the game state last game. You've got to figure out where you want to take these objectives and where you want to try and pressure out the Knights, because a 1v4 as the support, it just ain't it.
No, and I mean, he is in his own jungle. I'll give him some credit there, but at this point in the game, they're so tremendously far behind Goremizer, nearly 7,000 gold, that, you know, you don't own the same real estate that you used to. It looks like Obey are going to trade the Pyromancer for the Gold Fury here, which is about the best they can hope for. So this is good to get some farm back off the map and try and keep this game close. If nothing else, at least the Knights can't go get that Pyromancer now. But still, it's tough, man. It really does feel like there's just not a lot of space for Obey to operate.
The way I like to look at it is when you load into a Conquest game, there's a horizontal line right across the middle of the map. And that's your line of scrimmage, right? If you walk past it, you're on their side. If you don't walk past it, you're on your side. The Knights have effectively moved that to the tier 2 tower line right now, and maybe even a little bit further, because they don't seem to care too much about the tier 2s, and that's where things come through. Wherever the line of scrimmage is for the Knights is where Obey can no longer walk. They can't roam in their own jungle and feel safe anymore. And that's where it becomes like, is it even your jungle at this point? Like, it's the Knights' jungle. They just let you live in it occasionally when they decide to not be aggressive, or they have to go get some of the buffs on the other side that technically is theirs. And that's where my eyes are going to be, right? Is just how far the Knights can push this line of scrimmage, because right now, it's at the red line.
No, you're right, man. I don't know where Obey could go and feel safe at this point. They finally defend this red buff. That might be the first one of the game up until this point, but they push the Knights back out of their jungle. The Knights just got a tier 2, though, and all this extra farm. They might just want to back up so they can go spend some of this gold. I like this, though. They know that a lot of members have backed. Maybe they can catch Zapman by himself. Ducky grabs him. Zapman uses the beads, makes it over the wall. Inbound does have Blink. He finds his way over the wall. There's so many members of Obey here. They're definitely going to get this kill on the Zapman. It's just a question of how long. It doesn't take too long, and they shut him down.
And Neil, it's hard to tell. Is he trying to bait for Paul to come over? It looks like they still want to fight, and they're going to be going back in.
They do. Paul is waiting in the wings as well, so this fight is nicely favored. Desert Fury well timed. Volcanic Lightning, though, nearly out DPSs it, but Wowy finds another kill. But NeilMah now here. Paul flattens 2 with the double kill, and they turn the fight back around. It ends up being a 2 for 3 in favor of the Knights.
You know, sometimes all you need is that ult if you're Hebo, and that's enough to get it done. I think Qvo, like, there's one moment, if a knockup doesn't come up from Wowy, then maybe you even trade less for those kills. But Obey are picking up a little bit more often than they did the last game, right? A couple more kills here or there.
Yeah.
The problem is they're all going the same way. I mean, if you've watched that man's stream, he's used to seeing 4 people underneath him whenever he's at the tier 1 tower, especially if he has any sort of lead. It's just the way it goes for him. So that's not something that he's going to even be that tilted about. You get this kill, maybe you close up some of the gap between Wowy and Zapman, but Wlfy's still 4 levels behind. Weekend's still 3 levels behind. I think the kills, even though it's warranted to try and deal with Zapman, maybe he's the only one you can deal with because the rest are so far ahead. In fact, they're looking to dance around the Fire Giant right now.
They are, and I think they could do this. I mean, just look at the map. They've got the information, too, with all these wards as well. There's no one on Obey who's close enough to contest, and even if they were close enough, I don't think they could effectively contest. So this Fire Giant does belong to the Knights at this point. And Cord, we've been talking about how, well, the Grasp of Death comes out. It's not going to be enough to steal it, though. The Knights grab it. We've been talking about how Ducky was kind of the shining light, the one bright spot for Obey, but that's not been the case this set. Scary D has effectively taken him out of contention this set.
Yeah, it unfortunately goes back to what he said in the interview, right? Like, we kind of expected, honestly, even as King Arthur, I expect him to be bullying throughout this lane, but he loses his tower first, hasn't gotten the retaliation in the tower. He's been a part of 3 of the 5 kills, which is big, but when Scary D is 3-0, and of course we saw what he was able to do last game, you have to wonder if the impact is really coming down from there. Granted, he's doing the best on Obey, so maybe there's some warrant to that. Maybe you can throw Wowy in there, just 2-1-1, so maybe in that conversation, but like, it's something to be said that maybe he's not necessarily falling behind as much as it is that you can see the impact of a solo laner. It's not going to be enough to change the game state all the time, right? I think a good performance right now from Ducky could start to help win the game, but there's not much he can do on his own. He needs a little bit of help to get there.
Yeah, and Doug's starting to highlight that Scary D is doing this sort of popularized Amaterasu attack speed build. I think we saw this more towards the second phase last year for these Amaterasus. They would get the Berserker Shield, they would get the Ninja Tabai and lean into it, but this is really leaning into it with that Frostbound Hammer as well as the Ick from Scary D. He's doing a lot of his work with those basic attacks, and it synergizes well with his passive. He wants to get those multiple autos up on the same target so they're taking more damage.
Well, I'm just going to say, try to outrun him with the Frostbound Hammer and his own little movement speed buff, right? He has a sustain, and now, like you said, he's getting out those autos faster. Like, you're just going to have prod shred, and they're going to go in with it.
They're trying to fight around this grasp of death. The cage, though, slows down a lot of this fight. This is good, though, from Inbound. He pushes NeilMah underneath the Phoenix, and they burn him down quite quickly. This might be the defense Obey needed to try and hold on in this game. There's a lot earlier than I normally say this, but the game simplifies around these Phoenix defenses, and maybe Obey around Persephone, who's very strong in those defenses, can stall out the Knights for a bit.
It's very weird because we're not even 19 minutes in yet. I assumed we were at 28 minutes. I don't know where the time in my life went that we were 10 minutes ahead, but it's just you don't see teams rushing down a Phoenix pre-20 minutes. And I think that helps Obey out. Again, the Knights, the calls that are going to end up losing them the game are going to be a little bit on Obey. Where do they contest some objectives? Where do they win these fights? And how exactly do they make those calls? Much like Inbound pushing NeilMah there to save that Phoenix. But it's also going to be, how aggressive do the Knights get, right? Are you diving a left Phoenix before you really have any control over in the left lane? Like, you have to make these decisions, and you have to temper them out just enough that while you can keep your aggression, keep your lead, you don't end up, throwing something away that you have, right? 13,000 gold, 12,000 gold as it is right now. It's enough to coast on. You could lose a couple fights even and still be ahead technically, but you have to be very careful because if any of these objectives or any of these Phoenix sieges don't go your way, that opens the door for Obey to just barrage their way back in. 1:30 until the Fire Giant is up, that would open up an objective for them to potentially try and take some of those towers and even out the game state.
They're absolutely going to take the tier 2 tower in the short lane. That one falls very quickly. And to be fair, I mean, the Knights were over-committing a bit to that left side Phoenix, and they only lose Neil. They're still in great position to contest here. Inbound comes to the back. Grasp of Death makes it all the way to the back for Zapman and forces out his Purification Beads. That's good work from Wlfy. But the left side Phoenix is a sitting duck. There's no one there to defend that one, Goremizer, and the Knights grab it for free.
And being able to split up like this, I mean, normally you have a 4-1 split and maybe you get a Phoenix, right? A 3-2 split, getting a Phoenix, and looking like you could potentially win a fight, you pull out an ult from Weekend, you can still go in here.
Weekend finds the two-man knockup. That sets up for a nice kill there that Ducky gets. Wowy was pretty instrumental in it, but Paul now starting to find his stride with 9 in a row. Shuts down 2 with the double kill, but Ducky finds a double kill of his own. He shuts down NeilMah, but Scary D still full HP and looking to work. Looking to see if we can find Ducky, and the King Arthur finds a nice heal so he can keep standing, but QvoFred's gotten to Wlfy. There was no entourage there to back him up, and Qvo wants to see if he can find Ducky as well. Wlfy inside that passive does get 1 kill. A nice stun from Ducky nearly shuts down Qvo, so maybe not the cleanest. Obey finds some nice return kills, but they do get the left side Phoenix.
That was so close to potentially being a kill onto Ducky, and it could have turned into something more, but well played by Obey. It felt like some of those ults in my eyes started too early in the fight, but they ended up being essentially perfectly timed in order to deal with Zapman and deal with Neil. You can see both of them respawning at the exact same time, burning down that duo lane that got such a massive lead and has such massive control in terms of CC early, means it's easier for you to kind of free throw throughout the fight, right? You don't have to worry about, man, is Neil going to stun me with the Gungnir's Might? Is Zapman going to throw an axe and hit me in the back line? Once they're gone, there's not as much for Qvo or for Paul to maybe jump in on. Scary D tried to be that initiation, and he tried really hard and did really well with it. Unfortunately, still fighting under that right-hand Phoenix. There's just too much incoming damage for them to all survive throughout all that one.
Obey do well, I think, just to keep the game from ending there, though. And every bit of time they've bought, I felt like, since about the 19-minute mark onward, has been borrowed time, so they're happy. I think that they're even still really in contestation here. This Fire Giant can't be contested by Obey. They're giving this one up for free. And I want to talk about how well Ducky played that last fight, Gore. I think that he really did play it about as well as you could ask for from that King Arthur to buy his team some time. He had some really clutch stuns and was spacing his abilities out well. They're going to need a lot more from everyone on Obey if they want to hold on to these defenses, but they've got a strong comp where maybe they can do it.
And it's such a weird thing to hone in on, but juking the right way, because it doesn't seem like there's a bad way to juke. If you're not getting hit, that's always going to be solid. But he turned back into the Phoenix when he was low instead of trying to run to the base. And it's just the gap between Phoenix and base, QvoFred or Scary D, whoever can chase you down and kill you before you get to the fountain. But if they go back under the Phoenix, they're going to have to take damage there. And it's just those moments where you kite them appropriately so they take the maximum amount of damage, use what is around you as a sixth man in the team fight to deal that damage. Your Phoenixes are going to help you. And a split like this, they're looking, that's an ambush.
Inbound does catch Zapman. The Desert Fury doesn't get much, but NeilMah locked down. But that has to be the Mantle of Discord proc that stays in there, and it absolutely was. That's a big stun, and so QvoFred can come in with the Volcanic Lightning. The knockup's there to follow up as well, but Ducky manages to shut him down. Not before Paul answers back, though, with a double kill. Gets Ducky as well with the Crushing Wave, and there's only Weekend and Inbound left to try and defend. The Pittsburgh Knights have 4 to burn down the mid-Phoenix.
And just being able to take that one, they can push into the room. You still have to deal with Weekend, but I don't know if the damage is going to be enough, especially with Paul. I mean, he's 11-4 right now, Finch.
Weekend's starting to be in some trouble. He does manage to get back towards the fountain now, but with minions starting to pour in from mid and left, with 4 members of the Knights, should be able to take this game. Obey don't have enough tools at their disposal to defend here, and the Knights, in dominant fashion, clean up Obey 2-0.
I want to look at someone other than Paul's slash line, but once I realize he's
really
11-4 at the end, it's just hard to take my eyes off of it. And it's just, again, the setup coming from the rest of the team. There were a lot of moments where you see Neil running around and zoning out, right? And he's just charging up that Gungnir's Might. He's got the stun ready in the event they need it. And it's just the stuns, the CC, the control they had, again, from minute 1 with their aggression and the aggressive play. They all have stepped up. They've answered the question everyone wanted to see out of them in the offseason. And giving Paul something as signature as his Hebo and letting it go 11-0, you can't ask for more in your second game of the year.
Yeah, I would say that game was never really much in question, either one of those games. Obey did show us, though, some signs of life at multiple moments. It just wasn't enough to overcome the Knights. They're going to have to regroup and get ready for their next match. But that's enough here from Finch and Gormizer. Let's instead get it back over to Dolson and Myth to break it down.
Thank you, Finch and Gorn. Great job on the call. That's a bounce back for the Knights here in week number 2, and a bounce back for Susano, honestly, a god that had seen limited play and seen now a couple of times today. And wouldn't you guess it, he's got a new skin out right now. Knight of Storms, Susano, jump into game, check it out. He's in the Storm Hero chest, so you can jump into Smite, check out the Storm Hero chest, and maybe pick up a new Susano skin to tote around in your games. Mifflin's still with me to round out our day here. Miff, I think it's probably best to focus on the good that we saw from the Knights first of all, because, you know, a rough week 1 for them, not the first week you want to have fresh off a world championship, but here you are in week 2, and they come back from a rough week 1 in the best way possible, I'd argue.
Yeah, you said to focus on the good, and there's plenty to focus on. I mean, can't take away from Paul's insane slash line at the end of that match, proving that, especially now with these lifesteal changes with the boots, Hebo can be a fantastic powerhouse, as well as Bel Air just completely controlling that solo lane. I mean, Ducky didn't really get much time to shine. However, the one shining hope for Obey finds himself a 3-in-1 slash line, gets the majority of the kill participation as well. A slight nod to Wowy. He found some very early kills in a sea of pain that Obey was experiencing. Yep. So there were definitely signs that these guys can hang with the big boys, but unfortunately as a unit, they did fall a little bit flat.
I agree, and I like you pointing that out, and I like Finch kind of bringing that up as well. You know, specifically in games like this where, you know, Obey just behind, really, from minute 1. I think it was 4 minutes in. We were kind of sitting together, taking notes, watching the game. You were like, all right, this one seems like it's for the Knights. And I think it's important and good to look at the good that came out of it. And Ducky and Wowy, I think, were 2 bright spots for Obey, maybe that they're able to build on in future weeks. But real, I mean, you look at the top to bottom for the Knights in that game, and I love starting with this guy, Paul. What do you end 11-0 and something on this Hebo? You loved it in picks and bans. You said this is consummate Paul. I mean, this is the god that kind of embodies a lot of what he wants to do, and apparently for good reason.
Yeah, for those of us who in the chat who don't know Paul's storied history, he started out as a duel player, and my man was playing duel constantly. And he played Hebo, he played Hell, and occasionally he'd play Ullr. And in Conquest, he proved that all that time he spent practicing in duel is going to translate, and it certainly has. I mean, look at all of these plays: multi-man knockups, multi-man ultimates. Every single ability that he lands is finding above and beyond what you'd expect. And traditionally, when you think about Hebo, that is a single target damage god, but now when he's playing it, he's a one-man artillery strike.
And you know what I think just sucks doubly there for Obey is that it seemed like there were maybe 1, 2, 3 kind of engagements that game where Obey were just going to come out with a net win. You know, one more kill than the Knights, one more small man advantage. And it seemed like it was Paul every single time who would roll in, crash the wave over everyone, turn around a big fight. It just seemed like in the moments where it looked like Obey were going to finally win a fight, it was Paul who was putting a damper on that. And maybe it's just because the fight always turned when Paul made his way in there. I mean, it's hard to really put a cap, I think, on the Knights and know where their potential is. Do you think this is a Knights that's starting to return to some of that form that we saw during that World Championship run from the guys on this roster?
Yeah, in week 1, I think we saw some real growing pains trying to adapt to this new jungler in QvoFred, but this week he performed absolutely admirably. PK showed that if they're playing their own game, they're playing their own style, that they are going to be completely dominant, and they did it perfectly this week. There are definitely signs that this is a roster that you need to keep your eyes on. Similar to Radiant, similar to SSG,
Agreed.
Similar to Sanguine. Never thought I'd be saying that, but it seems like these are going to be the top contenders.
That's right. Here we are. Pittsburgh Knights back in the winning column, and that means we've got them back into the interview seat. Let's head to a post-game interview and see how they're feeling.
Thanks, Dolson. I'm here with QvoFred, jungler for the Knights, jungler extraordinaire, I'm happy to say. Well, Qvo, talk to me about this set, man, because I really think that you had some great performances from some individual players, especially Scary D in Game 1. What does it mean for the team when he's able to have a monster performance like that on the Camazotz?
Yo, what's up? Scary D really popped off the first game today, and damn, he didn't let go of that W key, and he just bring it home. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk to you a little bit about how the team is meshing too, because you're kind of the new addition to a team that's already been playing together for a while. So what's it been like for you in particular, trying to find your spot in this team, trying to figure out, how much shot calling you need to do or that kind of thing? What's it been like meshing with them?
It's been different because I'm so used to like playing with the Tricks tank and we would do our thing together, But this time around, I'm coming in as a new guy and like meshing with gang and solo, duo, and like how they want to play the game and how they want to call. So it's definitely new and it's super exciting. I'm enjoying it a lot.
Well, was there any extra urgency on this game, considering that you all lost your opener back in week 1? For what it's worth, I think you all have played really well in every game that you've been in so far, but I don't know how you all feel about it. Was there any extra pressure here to win this one?
I feel like the first game against Radiance, the first set, we showed a lot of potential. We lost the first game in the base race, which was super close, and then the second game, we just kind of messed up getting picked and stuff. But we definitely still wanted to go hard today and like show that we can do our thing.
We can see Scary, the man for game number 1 back there. Talk to me about NeilMah as well, then, if you could, a bit, Qvo, because in both games, I felt like his pressure was really critical to getting you guys off to a really good start. Well, what's he like in his impact for your team as well?
Neil is he's really good with pressure. Like he knows what he want to do and like he sees opportunities and he takes it. And he just did that today. He saw weekend with tier 1 boots and no mana at his own speed. So he just went down there and showed them who's the boss.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, Qvo. Are there any other shout-outs or anything that you want to do for us before I let you go, maybe to the org or anything like that?
Shout out to our org for picking us up and sorting us out. And also shout out to my teammates for being great.
Well, sounds like things are going well over there in the Knights camp. Appreciate you again, Qvo. Looking forward to the rest of your matches. I'll get it back over to Dolson and Mifflin so they can close things out.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Finch and Qvo. And I love watching the team in the back watching the interview happen right behind them. Obviously, great attitudes, high hopes for the future there. in the Knights organization. But I kind of want to look at the SPL as a whole from what we've seen over the last, I guess, 2 weeks or week and 2 days, I suppose. What's it going to take for us to get a 3-game set in here, Mifflin? It feels like a lot of these games we go into and we're like, all right, these are 2 super closely matched teams. But it just seems like whatever team gets the momentum from game 1 has been able to push that through into game 2.
I mean, I've been preaching since day 1 of SMITE that it truly is a momentum-based game. It's so easy to get in your own head, especially in long, drawn-out matches, that it is hard to get yourself back into it. However, I think as the weeks go on, all these teams are going to become more adept at reading the other teams. They're going to know more what they're looking for, and then we might see some more competitive 3-game sets. It's really a matter of time for people to figure out what they're looking for.
A little bit more balance here in the standings. Sanguine and Radiance, after 2 games for every single team in the league, stand tall in that 1-2 spot. Renegades and Obey looking for their first wins, and everyone else somewhere in the middle. Both teams that suffered losses today back in action tomorrow, and the road, I don't think, gets any easier for either team, Mifflin. Renegades immediately up against E-United, and Obey in the tied for top seed going up against Radiance. That's going to be a couple tough matchups for teams still searching for win number 1.
Yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to Obey. Playing against Radiance is going to be so difficult. It's such a dominant team, but there are plenty of good sets to come, and I imagine we're going to see a lot more from each one of these players. It's still so early in the league, it's hard to really say who's going to be coming out on top.
I mean, you look at maybe those matchups tomorrow. Do you think E-United Renegades then has the highest potential for upset between a team that's kind of 1-1 and E-United and 0-2 there for the Renegades?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Renegades, every set we've seen them play, they haven't won, but they've looked incredibly convincingly good. I mean, Barracuda's playing so lights out this entire season, as is Lazra. I mean, I can't take a single thing away from Lazra. He's been playing so well. It's only a matter of time until they find a win. Whether or not it's going to be against E-United is yet to be seen.
I agree. I wonder if it's possible, though, that E-United, the last time we saw them, of course, yesterday, fall 0-2 to Radiance. I wonder if that kind of carries over into tomorrow, Mifflin, if there's, maybe counter momentum as well. But I do like the question Finch brought up with the Knights there in the post-game interview. How much pressure was there to kind of win this next game? I think a lot of teams are starting to realize that we're still early in the split, early in the season. There's plenty of time to kind of make up ground. So I think Renegades, of course, searching for that first win. But I don't think it's necessarily looming large over their head and weighing them down all that extra.
I mean, the longer you go without a win, the more hungry you're going to be for it. And I think maybe a little bit of that stress could add on to the fact that you might make some misplays. You might go for some wacky ends. I mean, we saw even this week, Renegades made some questionable calls when they were leagues ahead in their draft, in the gold, in the state of the game, and maybe they were a little bit too trigger happy trying to pull that win off. So maybe it does play into their mentality just a little bit. But I think it is a good mentality to have, just to acknowledge the fact that we are so early on in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, I think, high hopes for Obey moving into tomorrow. Obviously tough to go back-to-back immediately into Radiance, but they can build on some of the strong that we saw today, maybe stand a fighting chance against the undefeated team at the top of the standings. That's all we've got for you, though, in SPL Season 7, Week 2, Day number 2. We've got a full day of SMITE for you tomorrow, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you tune in. On behalf of myself, Mifflin, everyone back in production, all the other casters, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.